The light is dim in the convent, not candlelight. Exactly, candles are for evenings, and it's barely morning. What you're seeing now is more like the sky's first accidental shrug. That bluish, indecisive glow that creeps in while everyone's still pretending to sleep. The air is still dense with linen, incense, and that unmistakable medieval bouquet. Old stone, barley porridge, and damp wool robes. You are not, as it happens, a knight, nor a lord, nor even a particularly motivated monk. You are Sister Gundrada, an average nun with average spiritual devotion and below-average enthusiasm for the abbey's rigid laundry schedule. Your hands are already chapped from last week's soap-root ordeal, and the thought of spending another day copying Latin psalms while Sister Ermintrude hums off-key beside you is, well, let's say it won't quicken the soul. You roll over in your wooden cot, pressing your face into the scratchy wool. The mattress smells like oat dust and divine indifference. Welcome to St. Marguerite Abbey, Burgundy, year 1142. You probably won't make it through this day. Before we descend into this gloriously uneventful spiral of monastic cheese and eternal matins, go ahead and gently like this video with the same hesitant thumb you'd use to poke a soft rind. Subscribe if you'd like to join us for more slow-paced chronicles of very tired people doing moderately important things. Comment below where you're watching from and what time it is there, if you're still awake enough to know. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. You blink your bleary eyes as the first bell tolls. Matins, of course. The great galloping thrill of dragging your barely conscious limbs across an unheated cloister to recite prayers in Latin you only half understand. The rhythm is familiar, though there's comfort in predictability. You wash your face in a chipped basin with water that might once have been ice, pull on your habit, and shuffle behind Sister Bertha, whose knees crack like dry branches with every step. The abbey's chapel smells of wax and damp stone. Above you, faded frescoes watch, silently, like heavenly judges with poor vision and no particular sense of urgency. The prayers begin, soft and monotone. You mouth the syllables. Your stomach growls. Someone sneezes with operatic force. A candle gutters. It's going to be a long morning. Here's the major historical fact of the day. In the 12th century, women in convents weren't just cloistered souls, they were producers of textiles, of manuscripts, of medicines, and, yes, of cheese. Some abbeys even ran their own economies, like sleepy, underlit startups, minus the coffee and the office ping-pong table. You, Gundrada, are on the dairy rotation this week, which means once the psalms and penitents wrap up, you'll be heading to the shed out back, where Sister Matilda, bless her cryptic mutterings and complete lack of dental restraint, awaits you. Oh, and the obscure tidbit. Nuns in Burgundy sometimes used animal stomachs to store whey, not for symbolic reasons, just because they were waterproof, kind of stretchy, and already lying around. Historians still debate whether this was considered gross or simply thrifty. After lauds, you head outside. The morning is damp and gray. The convent garden, with its rows of sad cabbage and militant leeks, offers little cheer. But the dairy shed, it's warm, not intentionally, but the cows breathe a kind of quiet heat into the air, and the hay underfoot muffles the world. You meet Sister Matilda beside a wooden vat. She hands you a bucket of half-curdled milk and says, "This one's yours," with the tone of someone passing off a baby they never liked. The recipe is simple. You stir the milk, you let it sit, you hum to it if you're feeling ambitious, or if someone is watching, and then you wait. Cheese, after all, is what happens when milk gives up and tries something new. Outside, the bell rings for terce. You stay seated by the vat, stirring lazily. A small breeze nudges the door open. Somewhere in the garden, a goose honks like a soul in distress. You're not supposed to enjoy this task, but you kind of do. It's quiet, warm, smells like breakfast, and, let's be honest, it's the one job where no one asks you to sing. Section 2. The milk is changing. It does that. First, it separates curds, here, way there, like two friends who've had a falling out. The curds sulk into soft, lumpish clouds, while the whey just sits there, yellow and slightly judgmental. You lean in and sniff. It's not bad, a bit sour, alive, in a way. Sister Matilda said to leave it longer. Let the angels decide when it's done, she mumbled, possibly about cheese, possibly about her back pain. You sit beside the vat on a crooked stool, which may once have been a ladder. Your fingers tap against the wood. Outside, someone is hauling firewood. Someone else, probably Sister Gisles, practicing Gregorian chant, badly enough to make God consider new hobbies. The abbey is alive in its slow, sleepy rhythm. The midday meal is barley, again, possibly barley stew, possibly barley porridge. The line between them is mostly a question of spoon shape. You eat slowly, watching a fly land in Sister S' cup. She doesn't notice, or maybe she does and accepts it as a protein blessing. Today's major historical fact: the Cistercian order, which many abbeys in Burgundy followed, had strict dietary rules, but cheese was allowed. In fact, it was encouraged. It was a humble food. Soft cheese, in particular, was seen as both nourishing and unpretentious, which, conveniently, described most nuns. You've never set out to invent anything that would involve effort. But the cheese you're fermenting now, well, it's not following the usual script. The texture is softer, wetter, something between a curd and a cream. It wobbles with a strange dignity. You poke it with a spoon. A fly lands in it. You sigh and spoon it out. Not the worst thing that's been in there, historically speaking. Here's a weird cultural tidbit. Some abbeys believed cheese could carry spiritual energy if blessed at the right moment. Legend has it, a nun once cured a headache by balancing a wheel of cheese on her head during Mass. That nun was never officially canonized, possibly for cheese-related reasons. You check on your batch again before Vespers. It's weirder, softer, slightly floral. You're not sure if it's going wrong or if it's going French. Either way, Sister Matilda raises one eyebrow and says nothing, which is her highest form of praise. Historians still debate whether soft cheeses like this originated accidentally or were intentional variations. The truth, as usual, probably involves a bit of both and, at least one case of mild neglect. You ladle the soft mixture into a cloth-lined basket and let it drain. The smell is buttery, faintly grassy. You resist the urge to taste it, not because it's forbidden, just because Sister Imelda once bit into a half-ripened wheel and couldn't speak for 2 hours, which, honestly, wasn't a huge loss. The sun has set. The abbey quiets. You curl into your cot, fingers smelling faintly of cream and linen. Outside, the cows shuffle. Somewhere in the garden, that same goose honks once. Maybe it's dreaming. You close your eyes. Your cheese dreams with you. Morning again. Not a grand one-no golden sunrise or heavenly chorus, unless you count the rooster's asthmatic screech from the henhouse. It's a damp sort of day, the kind where your socks never quite dry and your cloak smells like boiled cabbage even before breakfast. You rise before the bell, a rare moment of initiative, prompted less by piety and more by curiosity. You want to check your cheese. The walk to the dairy shed is quiet. Even the geese are still, possibly from exhaustion, possibly from divine intervention. The grass squelches underfoot. Dew clings to your hem like a clingy relative. You push open the shed door. There it is, your odd little experiment, resting in the cheesecloth like a sleeping toddler, lumpy, shiny, vaguely hopeful. You unwrap it gently. The texture has settled into something unplanned, soft but not runny, smooth but not smug about it. You poke it again. It wobbles with poise. You taste it, and it tastes ... good. That can't be right. Things aren't usually good here. They're functional, edible, occasionally less crunchy than anticipated. But this is creamy, slightly tangy, with a soft mouthfeel and a faint echo of herbs. You definitely didn't add. Congratulations, you've just invented something that doesn't have a name yet. The bells ring. Prime, you rewrap the cheese and shuffle back to the abbey, hiding a small smile behind your veil. Here's the major historical fact. By the 1100s, certain regions of France, especially Burgundy, were quietly becoming cheese epicenters, though most credit went to monks. The nuns were often left out of the story, despite being half the workforce and probably twice as tired. At breakfast, you slip a small piece to Sister Bertile, who accepts it with suspicion. She chews slowly. Her eyes widen a fraction. She nods once. High praise from a woman who once declared pickled turnips to be overly expressive. Bisexed word has spread. The prioress asks to taste it. She closes her eyes, mumbles something about the Virgin's mercy, and then, without smiling, asks if you might make another batch, officially, for the abbey table. You nod. Inside, a small, deeply sarcastic part of you wonders if she's planning to trade it for relics. You return to the dairy shed like a local legend. Sister Matilda pretends not to be impressed, but she hands you a larger vat and mutters, "Don't mess this one up," which, in nun speak, is basically a standing ovation. Weird tidbit of the day. In some convents, nuns named their favorite cows, and not saintly names either. One record lists cows named Little Sneeze and Old Lump. Sister Matilda once had a goat she called Abbot's Disgrace. You stir the milk with new reverence. Not because of the praise, just because it's the only time all day that no one is telling you to be more solemn. The warmth of the shed, the rhythm of the stirring, the way the curds begin to form like clouds gathering in a bowlets, oddly peaceful. You let yourself hum. Historians still debate whether women like you knew how revolutionary their small acts were, whether they understood that quiet innovations, cheese, medicine, ink, could echo through centuries. Probably not. You were just trying to survive the afternoon. The second batch begins to set. You smile faintly, then sneeze into your sleeve. The air smells like sweet milk and hay. Outside, the rain starts. Inside, the cheese dreams again. You're famous now. Not Rome famous, not even village famous, but inside the abbey walls, you are officially the one who makes the good cheese. With fame comes pressure. Now the other nuns watch when you work. Sister Oda leans against the doorframe like a cheese critic with a suspiciously clean apron. Sister Ermantrude accidentally leaves herbs near your vat. The prioress suggests casually, but pointedly, that the next batch be suitable for visitors. You stir your milk a little more theatrically now, just a touch of flair. Not arrogance, just performance under scrutiny. Today's major historical fact: medieval convents often served as guest houses for traveling nobles and clerics, which meant the food, though humble, had to impress. A good loaf or an excellent cheese could win an abbey favors, indulgences, or even the occasional shipment of figs. A bad one could be immortalized in a bishop's complaint letter. So yes, there's a bit of pressure riding on your cheese. You try a new batch with a dash of crushed elderflower. You don't ask permission. You just stir with conviction and hope for divine leniency. Sister Bertil brings you news during none. A scribe visiting from Lyon has asked about the cheese. Apparently, someone slipped him a slice. He described it as unreasonably soft and asked if he could purchase a wheel for his abbot. He also offered to trade a jar of ink, which is, frankly, the best offer anyone's made this week. You accept. The prioress beams. Sister Matilda mutters something about selling our souls by the ounce. You both laugh, though hers is more a cough, shaped like disapproval. Weird tidbit: there are records of nuns being fined in the 12th century for overzealous dairy practices. The nature of these infractions remains suspiciously vague. Possibly theft, possibly smuggling, possibly just making better cheese than the monks and being a little smug about it. You wonder if you're on that path. The batch with elderflower turns out light, aromatic, slightly sweet. Sister Ermantrude calls it a miracle. Sister Gisela calls it suspicious. You take both as compliments. Historians still debate how much credit nuns received for the food they created. Most recipes were left unsigned. The work was anonymous, offered up to God or the abbey or whoever was less likely to argue. But here, in the warm dairy shed, you know the truth. It's not about credit. It's about the moment the milk shifts, the soft tug of curd against spoon. The way something ordinary becomes something new through time, patience, and a little neglect. You scrape the soft cheese into a clay bowl, pat it down, and smile. The rain has stopped. The clouds are parting. You hear a goose honk, once your evening benediction. Tomorrow, you'll try a version with wild thyme, but tonight, you just sit quietly, hands in your lap, the smell of cream and herbs still clinging to your sleeves. Let the cheese rest. Let the day end. Let your eyes close. You wake to the sound of a cow coughing. It's not alarming, exactly. More like a deep, philosophical expression of bovine fatigue. The kind of cough that says, another day, another pail of lukewarm water, and a nun who sings to her curds. You stretch beneath your linen blanket, which has bunched at the corners like a disgruntled pastry, and blink into the milky half-light of pre-dawn. There's cheese to check, of course, but first, prayers. Prime. Your feet hit the floor like reluctant sacks of oats. The abbey stones are cold enough to file complaints. You shuffle into line behind Sister Hildegard, who smells faintly of mint and quiet judgment. Matins and prime blur together. You mouth the psalms, occasionally mispronouncing a syllable, just to keep things spicy. At one point, you swear you hear Sister Gisela snoring behind her sleeve. No one corrects her. Everyone understands. Breakfast is bread and weak ale. The bread is stale. The ale is suspiciously foamy. You eat with determination, like someone preparing to dig a ditch or write a passive-aggressive hymn. Today's major historical fact: ale was safer to drink than water in many parts of medieval Europe, even for nuns. The fermentation process killed off harmful bacteria. The side effect: everyone was slightly buzzed and didn't know why they were humming. You finish your meal and excuse yourself with barely a grunt. Back to the dairy shed, your true church. The batch with wild thyme is setting beautifully. It smells like a meadow at Duskerthy, floral, a little like a secret. You slice into the curd with a wooden paddle, watching it part like the Red Sea for introverts. The whey is clear, tinged golden, a good sign, probably. Sister Matilda drops by with an eyebrow raised so high it's practically monastic gossip. "What now?" she asks, glancing at the wild thyme. You shrug. God moves in herbs. She grunts approval and hands you a cracked jar. Inside are dried violets. You don't ask where she got them or whether she's testing you. You simply nod and add a pinch to the next batch. The color swirls like a secret. Weird cultural tidbit. There was a belief among some abbesses that flowers carried feminine virtues and thus could be used to gently redirect the emotions of the convent. Violets were for humility, marjoram for joy, rose petals for when someone needed to calm down and stop yelling about laundry. Historians still debate whether these floral theories actually worked, or whether they were just an elegant way to make the place smell less like boiled onions. You ladle curds, wrap cheesecloth, and hum to yourself. The new cheese is lighter, brighter, and smells like a botanical sermon. You name it in your head, not out loud, of course, but still, it has a name now. Silent Violet. You're interrupted by Sister Ermintrude, who has brought a guest, a monk from Cluny. You nearly drop the cheese. He bows politely, introduces himself as Brother Allard. His robes are clean, suspiciously clean. He's clearly here for inspection or negotiation or some other cloaked form of sanctified meddling. He wants to try the cheese. You pass him a wedge. Your finest effort, soft, balanced, delicate. He eats in silence, then nods once. This is ... He begins ... Surprisingly articulate. That's not a normal word for cheese, but you'll take it. You say nothing. Nuns, after all, are meant to be modest. But inside, a small part of you throws a victory banner made of curds. Brother Allard doesn't leave. Not immediately, anyway. He claims to be studying the relationship between female-led monastic economies and seasonal agriculture. But you suspect he's just here for seconds. By midday, he's loitering around the dairy shed again, offering unsolicited thoughts like, "Have you considered pressing the curds for longer? And I've read accounts of goat's milk being quite illuminating." You resist the urge to throw away at him. The prioress is thrilled, of course. The Cluniac order is prestigious. If your cheese impresses Brother Allard, it might impress the abbot of Cluny. And if he's impressed, you might just secure new funding for the garden wall that's been collapsing since Pentecost. No pressure. You mix a new batch. This one with crushed walnuts and a whisper of sage, a risky combination, possibly heretical in the wrong region. But it's storming outside, and nothing inspires culinary rebellion like distant thunder and mild ecclesiastical scrutiny. Today's major historical fact: walnuts were seen as brain food. In medieval Europe, some physicians believed their wrinkled surface mirrored the human mind and could stimulate thought. Others believed they were dangerous unless cracked under a crescent moon. You crack yours with a stone. Crescent moons be damned. As you stir the mixture, you feel a sense of ownership. You've made 7 cheeses now, each one different, each one intentional. That's new. Nuns are taught to be obedient, to serve, to fade into collective purpose. But here, in this small corner of milk and steam, you are something else entirely. You are an artist. Weird tidbit. In some convents, nuns wrote entire poetry cycles about food. One fragment from 1137 simply reads, "O blessed butter, O balm of the tongue, O holy fat of St. Annis's plate." It has never been set to music, for obvious reasons. You cut into the walnut sage batch just as Brother Allard reappears, pretending to inspect the thatch roof. You hand him a slice without a word. He eats, he chews. He looks thoughtful, too thoughtful. Finally, he says, "It reminds me of a forest sermon." You blink. "A what?" "A sermon," he repeats, "but with mushrooms and echoes." You stare at him. He stares back. Somewhere in the distance, a goat sneezes. Historians still debate whether Cluniac monks were as poetic as their letters suggest, or just deeply sleep-deprived. You're leaning toward the latter, but you've done it again. Another cheese, another quiet miracle. That night, you write down the recipe on a scrap of vellum. You don't sign your name, but you draw a tiny walnut in the corner. You sleep soundly, the storm tapping gently on the shutters. The cheese rests on its shelf, maturing slowly. Everything is in motion. Even you. The cheese shelf is getting full. It's not technically a shelf more, like a retired altar slab, pressed into service after a relic went missing and no one wanted to ask questions. But it's dry, cool, and perfectly sized for a small, motley family of soft, experimental cheeses. You visit it every morning now, like checking on children. Lumpy, fragrant children that improve with age and require no moral instruction. Today's major historical fact: medieval soft cheeses didn't age for long often, only a few days due to the lack of refrigeration. But some convents learned to store them underground in stone cellars, accidentally inventing the idea of cave-aged delicacies centuries before anyone marketed it to hipsters. You don't have a cave, but Sister Matilda knows a shady corner behind the root cellar where the air is cool and the mice are slightly less daring. You move your ripening wheels there, carefully placing each on a plank elevated by 2 bricks. They look ... proud, modest and proud, like saints of Derry, waiting for canonization. Brother Allard is still hanging around. You try to ignore him, but it's hard when he keeps asking odd questions, like, if cheese had a soul, would it be closer to joy or wisdom? And have you tried washing the rind with fermented apple juice? You suspect this is flirting. Cluniac still today he brings you a gift, a sliver of parchment bearing a 10th century recipe he found in the abbey library, something involving sheep's milk, honey, and a handful of crushed juniper. You read it, arch an eyebrow, and say nothing. But later, you test it, because you're curious, and because it's raining again, and because, if you're being honest, there's a part of you that likes being the abbey's unofficial cheesemaker, spiritual medium, and minor alchemist. Weird cultural tidbit. Some nuns believed that storms could affect the mood of the curd. A thunderstorm might produce a cheese that refuses to set, while a calm drizzle could encourage a soft texture. This belief was passed along without evidence, but with great conviction. Your new juniper honey batch turns out better than expected. It smells faintly of forests and regret. You let it rest, but not before tasting the spoon. It lingers on your tongue like a psalm whispered too slowly. Sister Ermintrude calls it a bit sinful. She eats 3 slices. You wonder, briefly, whether this is what joy feels like. Doing something slowly, fully, without the crushing weight of divine expectations. Just milk, herbs, thyme and a few increasingly poetic monks watching from the doorframe. You brush crumbs from your apron, stretch your fingers, and begin heating another pot. This one, you whisper to the milk, will taste like silence. It's market day. Not for unions. Don't get to wander the stalls buying ribbons and radishes. But the abbey sends 2 sisters and 1 donkey to the village square each week, usually with baskets of bread and herbs, occasionally a jar of uncomfortably fragrant liniment. This week, for the first time, they're bringing your cheese. 3 wheels, wrapped in linen, marked only with tiny stitched symbols. No names, no signatures, just the work. You watch them go from the cloister window, pretending to be deep in psalm memorization. Sister Matilda sidles up beside you, chewing something that might be fennel. She nods once. They'll like it, she says. Then, after a pause, or they won't. Either way, we keep stirring. Today's major historical fact: many convents had quiet but regular economic relationships with nearby towns. They weren't technically allowed to sell items, but donations in gratitude for blessed foodstuffs were a popular loophole. Cheese, being both wholesome and vaguely holy, made the perfect offering. You spend the afternoon cleaning the dairy shed. You scrub the vat with salt. You air out the baskets. You find a long-lost spoon that may or may not belong to Sister Gisela and hide it behind the butter churn. The sun is out for the first time in 3 days, so you take your curd to the garden. Sitting in the shade of the abbey's one brave pear tree, you watch the way the breeze lifts your veil and scatters dandelion fluff like wandering prayers. Brother Allard appears again. Of course he does. He sits beside you, uninvited but not unwelcome, and passes you a slice of bread. You both sit quietly, chewing, listening to the bees hum like tiny monks on an endless chant. After a while, he asks, "Do you think they'll ask for more?" You shrugged. "Depends how generous the Holy Spirit is feeling about mold today." He laughs, a soft, surprised sound, like a monk remembering he used to enjoy life before he had 2 inventory scrolls. Weird tidbit of the day. In some orders, laughter was restricted to special feast days. A laugh on a Tuesday could technically earn you penitentials. Of course, it was caused by divine ecstasy or extremely confusing goat behavior. You don't mind the rules, but you do enjoy breaking them just a little, especially when the result is cheese or laughter, or both. By Vespers, the sisters return, and they bring news. The cheese sold out. One man offered a goose in trade. Another claimed it cured his wife's indigestion. A third just wept quietly after eating it and pressed a silver coin into Sister Bertle's palm. The prioress says nothing, just nods. But she adds a new line to the weekly task board. Fromage Gundrada. You sleep that night with a smile on your lips and a smear of honey cheese on your sleeve. Outside, the moon is full. Inside, the Kurds dream quietly in the dark. Some days arrive quietly, like a cat slipping into a room. Others show up with muddy boots and questions. Today is somewhere in between: reluctant morning, all gray light and sloshing pails, where even the sun seems to be waiting for instructions. You rise late, not scandalously late, just none late, as in 2 minutes after the second bell, which, in abbey terms, is practically rebellion. Your habit is wrinkled. Your hair's doing that thing where one strand escapes and clings to your cheek like it's worried about the afterlife. Still, you move. You always move, habitually, liturgically, dare I. There's something strange about the air when you step into the dairy shed. It's not cold, not warm, just thick, full of expectation, the kind of air that settles before a discovery. Or a mild disappointment. You've experienced both. You approach the juniper honey batch. It's ripened beautifully. The rind has darkened slightly. You cut into it, slowly, reverently, and thereunder the blade, it's better, not just edible, not just passable, better, rich, earthy, sweet, with a sharp whisper of wildness. You blink. You look at the spoon like it might talk back. It doesn't, but it could. Major historical fact of the day. While monks had entire treatises on the spiritual texture of beer, there were no surviving medieval manuals for cheese recipes from convents. The knowledge was passed orally, from nun to nun, generation to generation, one curdled secret at a time. You feel that weight now. Not burdensome, just present, like you've stepped into a line of invisible hands, each one guiding the spoon. Sister Matilda appears with her usual cough and says, "You should write it down." She gestures at your cheese like it's a heretic who just recited good doctrine. You nod, but you don't. Not yet. The recipe's still inside you, like psalm verses, or the pattern of the stars above the bell tower. Weird cultural tidbit. Some medieval nuns believed in memory gardens, where planting certain herbs helped preserve knowledge. Thyme for clarity, rosemary for courage, parsley for patience. Some even whispered secrets to their mint plants, hoping they'd grow wiser. You've whispered to your cheese before, just once or twice. Nothing important, just things like, "Please don't curdle like last time." Brother Allard visits after none. He brings a wooden box. Inside of all things are dried apple slices, a rare treat. For experimenting, he says. But he looks at you like he's hoping for something else. You nod politely. Then, because you're both terrible at conversation, you ask, "Do you think God minds cheese?" He blinks. "What?" You gesture vaguely. It's indulgent, unnecessary, beautiful. God might think we're enjoying ourselves too much. He tilts his head. Then again, he made cows. You both sit on overturned buckets, staring at the apple slices like they might explain theology. You fall asleep that night with the taste of apples and wild herbs on your tongue. Your dreams are soft, slow, and slightly crumbly around the edges. The visitors arrive just after prime. 3 monks, 2 scribes, and 1 deeply unamused bishop who looks like he's allergic to joy. They're here on what's officially called a visitation, which is a gentle way of saying surprise evaluation of your spiritual and dietary choices. The abbey panics in its own restrained way. Floors are swept. Psalters are realigned. Sister Bertil scrubs a stain off the altar that's been there since the last eclipse. You're asked, very politely, to prepare a cheese tasting. No pressure. You pull your best from the shelves. The silent violet, the thyme curd with cracked pepper, the juniper honey wheel, a new batch with apple shavings and elderflower that still smells like secrets. You arrange them on a wooden plank that once held relics. Sister Gisela adds a few sprigs of rosemary for decoration, then scowls as if to undo the flourish. The bishop arrives at the tasting like a man walking into a duel. He sits. He nods once. The others do the tasting. He watches, occasionally raises an eyebrow like it's a form of penance. Brother Allard stands in the corner. You catch his eye once. He doesn't smile, but he does blink very slowly, like a man sending a blessing by eyelid. Major historical fact. While many bishops were wary of convent independence, they often turned a blind eye to local enterprise if it brought revenue or prestige. Cheese, oddly enough, became a symbol of soft diplomacy, a way to butter up the church without literal butter. The scribe praises the time batch. The monk from Dijon asks for the apple one twice. The bishop finally, reluctantly, breaks off a sliver of the juniper cheese. He chews, he swallows, he closes his eyes. Then, without a word, he writes something in a ledger and stands. That's it. No compliments, no judgment, just one scribbled line in a big, dusty book, and a nod that could mean either well done or you've passed my flavor test and may now die in peace. Still, you take it. Weird tidbit. One abbey in Aquitaine used to serve cheese in the shape of saints' faces. The bishop eventually asked them to stop, claiming it blurred culinary and iconographic boundaries. That abbey then pivoted to making cheese in the shape of fish. No complaints were recorded. As the bishop and his entourage leave, the prioress exhales for what may be the first time all week. They liked it, she says. You nod. You're part of something now, she adds. Not just work. History. That word settles in your chest like warm milk. That evening, you go to the garden and whisper your new recipe to the thyme, just in case. It's the quiet season now. Late summer has curled itself into the abbey walls, sleepy and golden. The sun arrives like a soft bell, casting warm stripes through the cloister. Bees bumble around the garden like they've had one too many chamomile blossoms. Even the geese, usually chaotic emissaries of honking terror, seem reflective. You wake without the bell. Your body knows the rhythms by now. Prayers, curds, prayers, again, stir, drain, salt, breathe. But there's something different today. The cheese shelf is nearly empty. You've made so many wheels, batches, bundles, gifts for nearby convents, donations for pilgrims, even that merchant from Dijon who offered 3 pewter mugs and a suspiciously affectionate pig in exchange for 2. Wheels of the creamy forest one. Now only one wheel remains asoft. You touch its rind gently, as if checking for signs of doubt. Major historical fact of the day. In 12th century Burgundy, certain cheeses were seen as offering sacrifices of labor and time. Some abbeys gave cheese to the poor on feast days. Others offered it at altars in thanks for good harvests. One even mailed a cheese wheel to Rome. The donkey died. The cheese survived. You're not sure what to do with this last one. Eat it, share it, bury it under the pear tree as a sacred relic. Instead, you wrap it in cloth and tuck it in your satchel. It's market day again. You're not going to market. You're going to visit your sister conventa, one over the hills, across 2 fields, and a suspiciously muddy bridge. The prioress said you could go. Take the cheese, she said. Take your time. You walk alone. The morning air thick with sun and the occasional existential sheep. The path is quiet. You pass a shepherd. He nods. You pass a cart stuck in mud. The driver curses softly, but waves when he sees your veil. You stop once to eat bread under a tree. The cheese stays wrapped. Weird tidbit. One 12th century account describes a nun who refused to travel without her own cheese. claiming foreign milk offends the soul. She was canonized centuries later, though not for that. By afternoon, the second convent rises into view, low stone building, slightly crooked, as if built by someone guessing. The garden looks chaotic in a hopeful way. You're greeted by a young nun with wild eyebrows and a warm smile. "You must be the cheese one," she says, as if that's your name now. You hand her the wheel. She cradles it like it might sing. Inside, the convent smells different, not worse, just not yours. More mint, less mildew, more sun in the corners. They cut the cheese carefully, reverently, like monks handling a relic. They eat, they smile, one starts humming. You stay the night. Your dreams are full of lavender and wheels, turning slowly, slowly, as the world spins on. You return to St. Marguerite Abbey under a sky so blue it feels exaggerated. Birds are arguing in the trees. A dog you've never seen before is chasing its own tail near the chapel steps. Someone, somewhere, is singing off-key. All is as it was. But you are not the same. You have seen another garden, another dairy, another wooden spoon with slightly better grip. The world is bigger than your cheese shelf and smaller than your hopes. You tuck those thoughts away. There are curds to stir. Back in the dairy shed, the vat is clean, waiting. Sister Matilda left a small note. Try sage and mustard seed. Or don't. What do I know? I'm 82. You do. Today's major historical fact. While many soft cheeses were unaged and eaten quickly, some convents began to experiment with longer fermentations, discovering that time, when treated gently, adds depth. It also attracts mice, but mostly depth. The new batch starts to thicken by none. It smells bold, confident, a little like the time Sister Ermintrude accidentally added 4 cloves of garlic and refused to apologize. You begin writing now, just a little. You borrow scraps of parchment. You don't use your name, just symbols, a drawing of a spoon, a crooked bell, a tiny wheel. You list ingredients and timings, stirring motions, waiting periods. You even write down when not to stir those hours, when the curd must be left alone to think about its life. Weird tidbit. Some abbeys believed that writing down recipes was an act of vanity. Others believed it was a holy duty, preserving divine methods for future souls. One abbess referred to her butter recipe as a hymn in 4 steps. Your hymns fill 3 pages by the end of the week. One is already stained with whey. That feels right. Brother Allard visits less now. You suspect he's been reassigned. You also suspect he left behind a small jar of smoked salt near your bench. You never ask, you just use it. The cheese made with smoked salt and sage tastes like winter preparing itself. The prioress tries it and says, "You're getting very good at this." You smile. "I'm only following instructions." She raises an eyebrow. Whose? You don't answer, not because you don't know, but because some truths are softer than others and harder to spread. That night, you light a candle by the cheese shelf. You sit in silence and you listen to the curds, to the garden, to your hands resting, to the life you didn't invent but slowly, accidentally have shaped. Autumn arrives with its usual drama. The trees put on their best performance, rustling gold and amber like they've just remembered the concept of flair. The garden begins to retreat. Cabbages sigh, leeks lean, and the mint stages one last ill-advised uprising. Inside the abbey, everything slows. The prayers feel heavier, the cloister stays darker, longer. The fire in the hearth starts getting attention instead of suspicion. It's the season of turning inward, of wrapping oneself in wool, of staring at the cheese shelf a little too fondly. Chestnut flower and rosemary this time, because apparently you've become adventurous in your old age of 28 or thereabouts. The curd is behaving, the textures holding. You find yourself humming a song that isn't even Gregorian. Major historical fact. Chestnut flour was a staple in some regions of medieval France, especially during lean years. It added substance to bread, porridge, and occasionally cheese, though its pairing with rosemary might be your own unique stroke of sleepy genius. Sister Matilda tastes it first. She squints. It's chewy, she says, but in a way that makes me question my decisions. Then she takes another bite. High praise, really. You take notes on a fresh scrap of vellum. You're keeping these records now, with something bordering on pride. Still no names, just your marca, little curl in the corner that looks suspiciously like a snail or a sleeping mouse. You can't draw, but the curds don't care. One surviving mold features Saint Barbara with a slightly alarmed expression. Historians assume it was meant to inspire caution during snacking. There's talk in the cloister now. Other abbeys have written. Word has spread quietly, but insistently. The cheese nuns of Sainte Marguerite are being requested for advice, samples, possibly even correspondence. The prioress is diplomatic, of course. She says you are a humble hand, guided by divine curiosity, which is a poetic way of saying you know what to do with milk and an odd afternoon. Brother Allard sends a letter. You stare at it for 2 days before opening it. It's short, just one line. I miss the sound of stirring. You don't reply, but you stir with more intention that week, and you let the silence fill in the rest. The nights are longer now. You start aging your wheels for more days just to see. The flavors deepen, the rinds firm up. One even develops a gentle, velvety bloom. Some claim monks invented it. Others insist it was an accident of climate. You know better. It was likely a nun with too many thoughts and not enough daylight. You sleep soundly, the scent of rosemary still on your fingertips. Outside, the wind rearranges the leaves with the grace of someone bored and barefoot. Winter arrives in a single breath. One morning you wake, and the air has turned to ice. The garden freezes. The geese go silent. Even the cows seem slower, their breath visible in little puffs that vanish before you can name them. Your hands crack now when you stir. You wrap them in cloth, but it's no match for the cold. Still, you work. The cheese doesn't care about seasons. It ferments with quiet resolve, just as it always has. You test a batch with dried lavender and fennel seed. It tastes like a memory of summer, told by someone who wasn't really listening. You keep it anyway. Major historical fact. Cheese was often the only preserved protein available in deep winter, especially in remote monasteries. Salted, dried, or aged in ashet was survival disguised as luxury, especially for those who'd taken vows of poverty but still liked their bread spread with something persuasive. The abbey feels smaller in the cold. Footsteps echo longer. The walls creak like they're whispering. Sister Ermintrude develops a passionate vendetta against drafty windows and starts stuffing them with wool scraps. You help her, mostly for the entertainment. You spend more time in the library now, not reading theology necessarily, but sometimes you copy down herb names or draw odd diagrams of wheels and molds. You find an old treatise that mentions milk as a reflection of divine creation. It's overcomplicating things, but it's sweet. Weird tidbit. There's an old abbey legend that winter cheeses carry secrets, not just flavor, but confessions. Whisper to your wheel as it ripens, and it'll hold the burden for you so long as you eat it before spring. You try it, whispered something barely audible, just to see. You begin teaching now, not formally, but younger sisters come to the dairy shed more often. They ask about curds, brine, why the milk from cow 3 never sets right. You show them, you let them stir. You don't correct their mistakes right away. Let the milk teach them. It's patient and merciless and wise. The prioress nods in approval. You've built something, she says. And I don't just mean wheels. You bow your head, not to deflect, but to acknowledge you have. You eat a slice alone, by candlelight. It is the best thing you've ever made, and it says nothing, just melts. The year turns. No trumpets, no declarations, just the quiet tick of time in the corners of your days. A longer stretch of light in the morning. A few green tips in the thawing garden. The cows begin mooing with more enthusiasm, which isn't saying much. Where the mold formed beautifully, unexpectedly, like lace. The cheese shelf is now 2 shelves, technically 3, if you count the slab in the corner that Sister Matilda claims is cursed. It isn't. It's just very good at aging a brined cow's milk blend you've nicknamed the Quiet Bishop, after a wheel that survived 3 storms and 1 visitation without cracking. Their work formed the invisible threads of food culture that quietly tether us across time. You spend your days half in silence now, not the awkward kind, the chosen kind, the kind that lets thoughts stretch, that allows cheese to become what it's meant to become, without interference or impatience. Visitors come often, nuns from other convents, occasionally monks, a few politely baffled scholars with ink-stained fingers and very strong opinions about fermentation. You welcome them, you let them watch, but you don't tell them everything. Some things must be learned by curdling, others by time. Sister Matilda passes in her sleep during Lent, peacefully, with one hand curled around a wheel of time cheese she called my greatest regret. You place it in the cellar, uncut. No one will eat it, but you still flip it every week. Out of respect. Spring comes. A girl arrives at the abbey gates. Young, nervous, covered in road dust and determination. She's heard of the cheese. She wants to learn. She asks you questions with bright eyes and a cracked voice. You recognize yourself in her. You hand her a ladle. You watch her stir. Historians still debate how legacy is measured by names written in books, or recipes whispered between fingers, by saints on walls, or by cheese that melts a little too perfectly for an accident. You don't debate anymore. You stir, you teach, you taste. And in the quiet moments between none and vespers, between rinse and residue, sit beside your cheese and listen. Not for voices, not for answers, just for the subtle, sacred sound of something soft becoming something strong. And now, as the abbey fades gently into the hush of night, the air cools. The dairy is empty, except for the slow, steady breath of resting curds. Candles flicker along the chapel walls, throwing halos of golden light onto faces carved centuries ago. You walk the cloister one last time. Your footsteps echo lightly against the stone, a rhythm of calm. Beyond the windows, moonlight bathes the herb garden in silver. The rosemary leans toward it like an old friend. Inside, the cheese shelves are still. Each wheel a quiet monument to time, to patience, to care. No names, no gilded plaques, just the soft certainty of having been made, and made well. You wrap your shawl tighter, not from chill, but from something gentler, desire to hold the warmth in. The prayers tonight are softer, almost whispered. You join them, not from obligation, but from quiet joy. And in your cot you lie back, hands still faintly scented with sage and cream. The world outside sleeps, the cows rest, the garden dreams. The cheese continues its slow alchemy in the dark. There is nothing left to do, nothing left to fix. Only breath, only silence, only the slow, sacred turning of time. Let it turn, let yourself rest. Sleep, dear listener, as Sister Gundrada sleeps now softly, with purpose, wrapped in linen and the gentle memory of milk made holy. Tomorrow will come, but tonight is still